Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining Athletic Definition. My name is Coach Ray Z, and today I have Steve Cotter with me. He is a fitness pioneer in kettlebells, also has instructed people in over 70 countries, which is amazing. Voted in the top 100 fittest men in America by a Men's Health magazine. It's definitely going to be a great show. For those of you that like jujitsu and like kettlebells, I'm going to tease a little conversation that I want to ask him about the origins of the Turkish getup. From there, I always like to get started with, and I do my research. I'm a fan, uh, but I always hear you talk about you got into martial arts at 12. But what about prior to that? Like as a kid, were you active? Were your parents like big sports fans? Did they drive you to work out or anything like that?
So, I grew up in upstate. Well, we call it upstate New York. Anything outside of New York City is basically upstate, but I was about 70 miles outside of New York City in the area that's pretty known is called the Catskills. You probably heard the Catskills. That's where Mike Tyson learned how to box, and so there. I grew up in a little town. I was born in the city of Newburgh. I'm 52 years old, so it's 1970. So I'm the youngest of five children, and all my siblings before me, they were all born and raised in New York City. So by the time I came along in 1970, my parents had finally said enough of New York City. So that's where I grew up until I was 9 years old, upstate New York. So it was mostly, a lot of rural, not country, because we would have like on the weekends there would be buses from the city where they would bring people to the different villas and the different, you know, uh, people would come there on the weekends to party to my town, my little town, which was called Plattekill. And so I grew up there, climbing trees, running. I was always, the athletic kid in my school, but the reality is in numbers, right? It depends on the school, it depends on the region. So in my little town, I was always an athletic kid. My favorite day of the year was field day, right? With the three-legged race, right? And the potato sack races. I don't know if you remember all that stuff. So 1970, right? That's when I was born. So yes, in terms of just my tendencies towards moving. Formally, not really. Formally, I played baseball, little league as a kid. I lived in Philadelphia for 3 years after New York. So from the ages of 9 through 12. So 1979, I moved to Philadelphia until 1982. And in those years I was playing baseball. Then I came out to San Diego, California in 1982 when I was 12 years old. That's when I began training in martial arts. So we could say that was my first formal beginning of the formal education in that regard. And so yeah, my whole life I've been embodied, we can say.
And to me, that was what was interesting because when I first heard of you, I heard of you through kettlebells, and then I was like, oh, okay, this guy's really fit. This guy's really in shape. And the more I learned, I was like, oh, okay. And then I found out you were a martial artist first, so then I was like, oh, that's even more interesting and more fascinating. So I've seen a lot of your YouTube videos as well, and you are a pioneer in kettlebells, and I kind of have some questions because you know they say pelvic was like one of the first ones to influence the West through videos.
Pavel Satsuli.
Pavel, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I carry the whole history, the modern history with me because I was a player in the formation of the story that, here, so I mean, there's a modern history that begins with Pavel, as you said. So Pavel has his, I kind of, this idea of a story, right? We have history, right? History, when we talk about history, we're talking about the past of things that happened, right? That we can look back upon, but it's a story, right? So, it's interesting when the history is still being written as opposed
Yes.
to, okay, we're going to study the American Revolutionary War, right? Or the Civil War or whatever historical, the assassination of JFK, right? These are historical moments, but there was also a historical moment where one day there's no kettlebells, and now one day now there's kettlebells, and forever the story has changed, right? Because if you're in fitness and you're looking for what, to get in shape, basically you have to have some level of familiarity with a kettlebell. If you don't at least know something about a kettlebell at this stage in the game, you are very, very far behind whatever the cutting edge is in terms of athletic, and fitness in this space, right? Because it's not one thing. It's not just fitness. I'm a martial artist, as you indicated, and everything I do is informed in that. So really, where I created a unique way in kettlebell is what I do is the martial art of kettlebell, which means there is no style, because my style is not your style. And we can have teachers and models along the path, and we can model aspects or even large aspects after individuals, but at the end of it, the student becomes the teacher. So yeah, I'm a martial artist in the true sense of the word, because it's a lineage, and I also am lineage, and I'm a lineage holder in a particular martial arts system that dates back, you know, the legends say thousands of years, but we know for sure at least, several hundred, right? So there's names. And so I'm the end of that list, one of the few white people, right? Because they're all Chinese before me. So, and then in recent years, I came to the Jiu Jitsu, which is the Brazilian. So I started with the Chinese martial art when I was 12. And then, I kind of reintegrated back to where I'm ready to have a teacher, ready to have a sensei again. And in between, I was a Ronin. I was wandering the earth via the kettlebell. So the kettlebell was my sword that basically allowed me to travel to all corners of the globe. And it took me the full circle to where I was able to look backwards. And when we can look backwards, then we understand things, right? Because we went through it. I didn't know that I was doing the martial arts. I thought I was doing the kettlebell. But what I realized now, and have for some time now, the jujitsu brought me to that, toward the understanding where I was doing the martial art the whole time, but I didn't have a teacher, I didn't have a school, so I created my own. I created my own style, like Bruce Lee did with martial art, Jeet Kune Do, right? My style, we could say, is IKFF, because that's my business, right? That's the educational aspect. But even that has a specialization. We focus on certain things. We don't focus on the infinite, right? But as an individual, there is no limits, right? So your style with kettlebell, what you teach, that may not be how you want to play, right? Like jujitsu, like you learn, but you develop your own game, and you're playing. You see it, you follow. So anyway, I'm going to, real fast with all this, but the history. Pavel, he wrote a book called The Russian Kettlebell Challenge that was published in, I believe it was 2001. Now, prior to there being kettlebells, there was a book and there was no kettlebells. And then in that couple of year period, Pavel had a very influential business partner, which most people never hear this part of the story, but it's a man named John Duquesne, who was the publisher and is the publisher for Dragon Door Publications. So, um, Pavel is a unique character, very charismatic, and he definitely did a lot. He was instrumental in all of it in the beginning. And that was my first exposure. That was everyone's first exposure, However, when there's an artist, a lot of times you don't see who's the screenwriter, right? You see the actor. You don't necessarily see. And in the telling of the history, you need to understand the whole story. So, he's a very instrumental figure, like Pavel, in the sense that he was created the platform that the personality of Pavel could market, and then he could attract someone like me, where I was first generation, the early adapter. So that's where I come in the story, is I was an early adapter when nobody even knew. So if you want to talk chronologically, we're talking about a lot of things coming together at the same time, because there's internet, which is still very nascent at this point. 2000, I don't know if I had my first computer till maybe 2001 or 2, something,
Roughly, yeah.
desktop Mac, and the fat ones, whatever those are called, right there. Anyway, um, So right at this time where internet was new, internet commerce was new, Facebook maybe not yet, YouTube just starting, there was MySpace, and then there was the first fitness pioneers who, okay, were selling fitness on the internet, right? Never been done before, because before, if you wanted something, you go into a sporting goods store and you buy a basketball or whatever, right? Now, so in this story, it came first on the internet. The sporting goods stores didn't really catch on till at least 8 to 10 years, right? The sporting goods store only started catching on in the last decade, like Target, right?
Mm,
Last 5 years, you can go into Target, maybe 6 years, and get a still not a very good one because they don't know what they're looking at, but you can get something resembling a kettlebell, right? Or Dick's or whatever these big. But it wasn't like that. It was over the internet before. So anyway, the early adoption, and that's where I came in. So yeah, Pavel's a major story. Um, I'm the one that brought it around the world because Dragon Door was really entrenched, and they're based in St. Paul, Minnesota. So if you wanted to learn kettlebells, you wanted to be certified in this brand new kettlebell certification that they had created, called the RKC, right? Russian Kettlebell Challenge. Well, you went to Minnesota for that, and you found out about it on the internet, right? In chat rooms and forums. And so I was a wolf among, how do you say, not among sheep, but you know uh, you have the kind of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or whatever. You have the ones that have the background and are able to excel in that format. Think about if you're playing basketball and your entry point is you're in the NBA. No way, right? But
right.
maybe you're the best kid playing basketball in your little neighborhood court. You see, there's levels to the game. But back then, there was no levels because there was no kettlebell. So the level was whoever was the best of that created, right? So I was in that small group where Pavel's like, hey, I want you on my team, right? It's the first time we met because I already could do the stuff when I met him because I saw the video and I taught myself 15 years of Chinese Kung Fu training. I know how to stand, I know how to breathe, and a lot of things I didn't know that I've learned since, and we always learn, we keep learning, but the point is in that time and place, because when you tell the story, you have to also understand the time and the place. We can't recreate with this
Modern technology like we're on now.
this agenda that is uneducated, the idea that we cannot erase history. We have to understand time and place, and just because something may not be appropriate now doesn't mean that it was not appropriate. You understand? So
Right. At the time.
filter.
And
We can't filter the past through what we know because information is always moving. So each generation is always going to have more access than to the previous, right? And we can only do what we know and what we learn. So if we're ignorant, we're going to have behaviors that are at that level of understanding. And that's going on right now in society, and it's not necessarily a positive. There's pros and cons to everything. But what I'm saying is, if you understand the story of the kettlebell, you have to understand the time, the place, what was going on in the world, right? So I'm kind of painting that aspect of it. Yeah, it's a ball in the handle. You can go on any social media and Instagram, and you can see put in kettlebell. You're getting all, but where do you begin? Like, there's so much information, right? So
it's always the basics that you begin. And at the time that this is all happening, and you're mentioning the internet is kind of barely taking off. How did you get so well known to be able to be requested at over 70 countries? That's amazing. When you think about it, there was no Instagram, there was no like Facebook for you to go out there and show something that I it wasn't even mainstream. So how do you get people so interested?
I say blessings, I say gratitude, because that's the only thing that makes sense. We have to always give gratitude because it's where we focus. I can focus on the things that I want that I don't have, or I can also focus on, man, you know what? I have this and I have this and I have that. And, maybe I don't have that, but I got all these other things. And thank you so much for that. So I can't really answer if you say, like, I could create an answer, But honestly, having an honest conversation, I can't say there's any one thing that I could say it was this or that. It was a series of interconnected things. But ultimately, in a word, it's my destiny. Ultimately, um, I was chosen to carry certain information, but it's not my information, right? The information is greater than, uh, it's not a cult of personality, at least not with me, right? Because I'm an artist, but I'm not that eccentric because the information, if it has use, it's going to have use with or without the personality that you learned it from or that you got it from. You see what I'm saying? And that's the thing about it, is it's empowerment. So that's the gift, to be able to teach or to be able to lead. But there's a lot of things we can look at. First of all, again, circling back, I told you Pavel, he was the first. He had the accent, he had the mystique. Oh, this Russian, Soviet, and the marketing, the ad copies, Dragon Door, the writer. Okay, there's a saying: the pen is mightier than the sword, right? Well, with the pen, if you understand the power of the words, you can create this fantastic tale. And that's just what happened. And the internet was taken off. And it's like, whoa, who's this Pavel guy? Me? No, because I was a trained artist, martial artist, serious from childhood up to now. I'm a young adult, you know. So 2001, I see the advertisements in the catalog. It's a martial art company. It started as a martial art company. And that's why I was on their mailing list. So we get the quarterly color brochure in the mail, and I see this kettlebell, couple issues, right? Maybe a year goes by. I'm like, these are expensive, but then eventually I had to have it. I had a chance to touch one. I touched it. I felt it from the ground, boom, all the way up into my hand. I'm like, yes, this is it. So I got kettlebells right away because the money comes when at that time it was simpler times. I was just starting out. I was a young baby. I have three kids now. My youngest is 18, but at that time, we're talking early 2000s. So, got my hands on the kettlebell, and then from there, it just Dragon Door was very in the beginning. Dragon Door, my first publicity of that was with Dragon Door because I don't want to say a bit player, but it was kind of the platform is they had Pavel as the personality. He's the guy. And then he had his like eight immortals, kind of where I was one of those eight immortals, where Steve Maxwell's a pretty prominent guy. If you follow fitness, Steve
Yes.
Maxwell. So we are colleagues at this point. Mike Mahler is a prominent guy even though he's not much in the spotlight, he transitioned more in business and supplements. But for many years, Mike was one of the first guy, to put out information about kettlebell. That wasn't Pavel, right? Um, and a few other people that are still around. Jeff Martone was very prominent for years. Jeff Martone was running the CrossFit kettlebell. He taught most of the CrossFit affiliates learn, at some point if they trained in kettlebell with CrossFit, they were, so uh,
Interesting.
yeah, it was kind of this inner circle group. So we were getting promoted to a certain level, but again, there is a glass ceiling, and you only grow as far as you can grow in that box that you're in. Then you got to bust out if you're going to keep growing, right? So, um,
And you mentioned Maxwell, and I was reading earlier, and I think he got his black belt like really early,
was one
maybe
of
2000. Yeah, one of the first Americans.
he was the third American.
Oh, by giving the belt. This, I guess, the article said by Gracie,
Earning
one of the Gracies. Yeah,
jiu-jitsu by Helson. And
and you started your jujitsu journey like me late. So after having so much success in kettlebells and everything else, why would you want to start something new? You kind of answered it with the last one saying you won't grow, but
jiu-jitsu is the truth.
a
And
lot of people won't even try something new, especially at
I've
once you're so physically fit like you are.
Well, you know what? We're humble. We're all humble in the eyes of the Almighty. And I don't try to name anybody. For you can name it what you want to name it, but there's a power that is beyond this individual that embodies this one small body. I might be powerful, but I'm not that powerful by myself. And there's other creatures in this universe, and there's other entities on this very planet that we exist upon, which may not be in your visible spectrum. And just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there, because there's the known and there's the unknown. There's the seen and there's the unseen. But to answer your question, jujitsu is the truth. So there's nothing to fear about learning about yourself, because you cannot win but except by learning how to lose. And if you're afraid to lose, then you're afraid to win. you know. And I just want to keep learning. I just want to keep getting better. For sure, if rewind the clock and now I'm 18, 19, whatever, and I'm in that, now I'm training to be a world champion, but I came at, now I'm 52 and I stay in my lane and I fight when I compete, I'm going to compete, at least in the big events, I compete against the guys in my age bracket, because that's the respect to the art. I'm not going
Right.
to try, I'll train with everybody, young guys, old guys, but I'm not going to, there's limits to everything. And it's not because the old guys can't beat the young guys, because they can at certain times, right? Because everything, it's styles make fights. It's not about, it's just about, it's a team. You know what I mean? It's a team, and it's like jujitsu is really unique because you don't fight alone, but you do fight alone. You're by yourself, but your team is so important, because that's where it's the training, it's the practice. It's, you can't do jujitsu by yourself. So you and I have to have an agreement. You and I have to have a trust, and we're going to slap hands, and we have a code that we live by, And if you get position and I'm going to get hurt or I'm going to black out, I tap and you agree to stop, and vice versa. Okay, so where else in society do we have that level of trust and that level of, and I didn't understand these things when I was getting into jujitsu. It's just I was blessed to be very good friends with one of the all-time greatest, and Shanji Hibero, who I first showed Shanji kettlebells back in 2006 in my backyard in San Diego, and we kept in touch all those years, and I never took advantage of training with him until some years later. So it was just New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, about to be 2018. Shanji's older brother Salo walks in. I'm training Shanji in the kettlebells at the academy, and he's like, "Hey," it's like we known each other for years, but it was our first time meeting, and he knew me from his brother and the respect from his brother, and he's like, "Why aren't you doing jujitsu?" And he looked at me, and I'm like, "These guys, Shanji too, but Salo's different, man. Salo is a killer in just, and they're both some of the greatest competitors ever in jujitsu, and bona fides at the highest level. So that matters. That matters when you can test it out and it works, and so just having that blessing, because I've always believed that you're better to learn any art from a great teacher than to learn a specific art from a poor teacher. I don't care if it's jujitsu or whatever, but it was just that moment is like when this legend, warrior is looking in your eyes and like, "Why are you not doing jujitsu?" I'm like, I didn't have an answer for that, right? He hands me a gi. That's my first day. I never looked back. 10 months later, my son, at that time he was 15, now he's 18. I got him. So he's been training ever since. And it's like I get to do the whole, I started when I was 12 and then I moved away from, and then I came back and I got to start all over again. And my son, it's like I get to do it again. And my son gets to start with all the knowledge that I didn't have. Not that I love the kung fu, and everything I learned kung fu is super. I mean, my mobility, most of that comes from the, but I'm just talking about fight science wise, the evolution of the game, and the jujitsu it changed the modern combat, There wouldn't be MMA if it wasn't for jiu-jitsu. And I'm not saying, oh, this art, that art, and comparing. No, because it's the individual. It's just to say that when jiu-jitsu wasn't there was no MMA. And then once we became aware of jiu-jitsu, then the MMA very quickly came together, because that was the rope that brought the ranges. It was the range where if you can't defend against it, the guy's going to beat you unarmed, man to man, if you don't know. So everybody had to learn how to defend against it. And then they had to learn certain things. And, so it wasn't like that. Kickboxing was around for years. Karate was around for years. All these things, judo, they were around for years, right? So, it just completed me, man. I love it so much. It's my first sport, and I love kettlebells, but I consider jiu-jitsu my first sport, and everything else I do is just to contribute to that. Kettlebell's been my profession for about 2 decades now, in terms of how people think my name is made because of kettlebell, but actually it's because of martial art. The kettlebell gave me the platform to exhibit my martial art expertise. And, it gave me the platform to be able to connect with high level people such as Shanji and Salah Huberto, to where now there's no red carpet, because you still start as a white belt and you're still going to get smashed. So I don't
Right.
know who you're friends with. You're still going to go through the ringer and earn your way over time. Pressure makes diamonds. And, jiu-jitsu is like all the other things. It's like, if you want to get good, you got to do it every day. And that's getting my son as a 50. Well, at this point I was in my late 40s still. But when I brought him into and he started, I told myself that's when I got more serious, because before that it was like, I'm 48 years old. I got a business, I'm tired, I'll go tomorrow. This is not my job. But when he started, it was like, I can't let my 15-year-old son miss class, right? I got to make sure he's there.
Mm.
Therefore, I have to be there. And that got me into just, I don't know that I would have come into that habit if it wasn't for him, but the responsibility of it. It's like, okay, now he's starting his formal martial art training, you know, because for a long time I didn't know if I was going to be able to share that, with
That experience. And does your son also do kettlebell? I'm assuming it's
yeah,
such a good combination, jujitsu and kettlebell.
he does, man. And he surfs and he skates and he snowboards, and he played football all through grade school, through high school, and it's a different generation now, man, because it's like you got to develop the business mind and doing business and making relationships. And it's like, he's a young man. My daughters are older than him. They're young women. um, so I'm happy about the progress, because it's not like the parent doesn't decide anymore like it once was. Like, the kid can do what they want to do. The kids can be happy and pursue their interests and figure out what their contributions are going to be. They don't have to be necessarily, oh, you're going to be this, or you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be an accountant, you're going to whatever, you're going to run this company for your, what I'm saying? So I'm really happy about that, because nowadays, with the advance of the speed and the technologies, and like this new one that we're using here, or platform, a new type of platform. Um, there's no limits. You can bring your passions together and integrate that with your lifestyle and with your business, for, your what you're offering to the world. And so it's really exciting, this. But yeah, the jujitsu, it's we can talk for hours.
Right, right. I always with any basically jujitsu guests I have on here, pretty much could do the whole show. But I also wanted to touch on, since you mentioned, you got to train with a black belt, legend, and I'm sure you got to meet other top athletes, and you've trained people all over the world. And what do you prefer to train? Is there like, do you prefer to deal with athletes or the average person? Anything in particular?
That's a really, really great point. It definitely has changed. When I got into, so my first career, I started when I was 15. I started with the Kung Fu at 12. And then by the time I was 15, I started teaching as an assistant. But then also I started a children's program because at that time in the Chinese Kung Fu, it's the Sifu, right? And the Japanese, it's the sensei. And in the Brazilian, it's the sensei usually, or professor. But in the Chinese, it's the Sifu. So my Sifu at that time, he never like to work with kids. And I had this natural ability to communicate and have fun with kids. So I started teaching kids when I was 15. I started working for the local in the city where I am in San Diego with the community center, teaching a program through the community center. And then so through my late teens, teaching children and developing a children's program in the martial arts as well as adults. That was my first career, and I was teaching martial arts as my full-time job for up until I was about 27 years old. And then at that time I had a major separation with my first sifu. Again, in that tradition, the sifu's teacher, but it really means teacher father. It's like a teacher father.
Mm,
It was a we had been very close for those years, and now we had this parting, so it was an existential type of moment in life at that time. It's like, now what am I going to do? I guess I'm not going to be, you know, so now I become the Ronin at that point. I'm excommunicated uh, from the not from the lineage, because once you earn the lineage, your lineage, like, sometimes it splits off, but you can't take that back. So I'm lineage, even though I didn't stay with him, and I kind of went on my own. But I didn't, I continued doing martial arts with a small group just at the park for like 3 years, and I was mad, so I was training all the time, and this just kettlebells came on the tail end of that. So this
mm,
late '90s, between like '97 and 2000, and in that point, everybody, whether they know the name or not, they've seen, it's called the Bosu. It's a usually blue half ball that you stand on. Very close friend of mine invented that. We've become very close friends. That was in 2000, so it's been 22 years. But I was working with him when he first invented it, when it was still being made by hand, where he was literally cutting the balls in half and
wow.
staple and glue and duct tape. So traveling around the country doing trade shows and promoting this Bosu, which at that time was a new, and still every gym, every therapy place in the world almost has one or more. So that thing is all everywhere, right? So it was a home run in terms of products that was selling and continues to sell. And so in that period, and then the kettlebell came on again, as I mentioned, around 2001, early 2000s. And anyway, man, we're talking about so many things. I don't even remember the direction of this particular, what I was supposed to be talking.
Oh, no, no, it's interesting. I love knowing about the whole origins and everything, but I was asking you, with all your experience, what do you prefer teaching? Like young kids,
Right.
pro athletes, the average Joe.
So when I first was getting into that, I was in my early 30s, and my intention was, I'm gonna make the strong people, the athletes and the strong people, notice me, and I want to make sure they respect me. And in terms of like physiologically, I'm a muscular guy, but I'm not a big guy. I'm like 5'6", 5'7". So, and because I have always trained, I carry more meat than most guys my height are probably like 140, 145. And I've been, now I'm around 160, 162 at my peak. When I was lifting heavy 15 years ago, I was up to about 176. So, that's my frame. And but my mindset is always like, I want to go up to the offensive lineman and I'm going to get in that guy's face because that's my mindset and it's always been that way. And when I went into it, it was like, okay, who's the power lifters? Like, and that's how I made my name early on because it was like there were strong guys, but you're 220 pressing, and I'm like 165 pressing the same weight, and so and that's why even martial arts, looking boxing, like I'm look that lighter weight that has the skills and not necessarily I want to just see two big guys beat on each other. I want to see the execution and the optimization of the biomechanics. So you're small, but you're packing a lot of power into it. And that was my early, and it so happened in that early years because it took. So again, 2001, I started self-trained. 2002, by 2003, I'd been training for a little over a year on my own. I started integrating it locally with my personal training. I was bringing it to my Kung Fu classes. We were integrating with the Kung Fu classes at the parks. By that point, it was only on the weekend because from 97, I started going to university. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be doing Kung Fu as my profession anymore. So now what? And I'm thinking, so I ended up going to university and getting my degree in kinesiology. So that was a 4-year intensive period where I was a full-time student. And so that's when all this was happening with the kettlebell coming on the scene. Finally, I met Pavel in 2003. I went through his course. He connected and was like, "Man, I want you to be one of the instructors in my in the RKC." So I started working with them, and at that time it was like 3 times a year. So I go out there 3 times a year to Minnesota where they do this 3-day certification course out there. And getting the publicity through Dragon Door to some degree, not to the degree that I was wanting, but again, Pavel was the star of the show. I was a support player, so that kind of got it started. But it was I taught martial arts for very many years, so I knew how to teach. I already knew how to. I didn't go there to have to learn how to coach any of that stuff. I'd been teaching that longer than probably anyone there. As far as like directing people and leading a group. It's something that you develop as a skill by doing it, right? And so I just started applying it to the kettlebell now. Different tool, but you still have to command a group, right? And that was so it took a couple years. By 2004, I made my first DVD called Full Contact Kettlebells. And then I made another one 2005, Full Contact Kettlebells Part 2. And then I started doing DVDs with another company in New York that was at the time, they were the biggest MMA. They were doing MMA videos mostly. In fact, Salo Ribeiro, who's the main sensei of my jiu-jitsu family, he did videos with them back in like 2005, 2004. So it's circles within circles how the pieces connect. But I started doing DVDs, and at that time, the company Shihan, which we created out of this MMA, is called World Martial Arts MMA videos. Now you got to again time and place. In 2004 or 5, in that era, the Brazilians just started coming to the U.S. You mentioned earlier, Steve Maxwell was one of the first American black belts, right? There was no Brazilian black belts in U.S. yet. That didn't happen until like 2005. Now, every major fight team has their headquarters. It was in basically Still Lakes, California, but now some of them are in Texas and Florida. But SoCal is, if you compete in SoCal, you're competing at a world because it's like what Brazil was and still is in terms of jiu-jitsu now because Atos has their headquarters. Ribeiro has their headquarters here for a long time. Alliance has their head, a lot of big names. Marcelo Garcia's in New York, and there's a lot of good people in New York, but definitely it's a big hub here.
Hmm.
And, that's what's so cool about the jujitsu art, the way that the system has been vetted. Like it's very hard, especially in a city, and especially in a place like San Diego and SoCal and LA and New York. Like you can't there's no fake, like you can't have a fake black belt and stuff anymore in that because you're going to be exposed.
Oh yeah.
And more than back in the early days of the martial arts, before MMA and jiu-jitsu was prevalent, there could be a really big variety of like a black belt, in kung fu and in karate. And it's like some of them might be really good, but some of them, not sure they could really use that. And actually, they couldn't really use a lot of what they're doing in any real situation. Whereas we know jujitsu, it's 100% what you learn works, regardless of if it's a sport or if it's you're defending yourself, right? Because it's a self defense first. It's not competition. That's just if you want to do competition, right? It's just a test. And, so anyway, it's in that period of time, with the DVDs and the company I was filming them with, he was putting everything on YouTube. So that's really what created the international market. I got my start domestically with Dragon Door, and especially when I had my first DVD in 2004, that's when I started going around the US and I was doing seminars in different cities, East Coast and around. And then when I started producing videos, I produced a video called The Encyclopedia of Kettlebell Lifting in 2005 with Shihan. And that was and still is, it's probably one of the most passed around. Again, it sounds, pompous and stuff, but it's just the truth. A lot of people that started in kettlebell, they were starting by watching my videos, because if you go back 15 years ago, there really wasn't hardly anything. There was Pavel, and there was me and a couple other people. Steve Maxwell had a few things, but he didn't actually get into videos later. I actually brought Steve Maxwell in with me with Shihan. He came a couple years and started working with the same company, and that is actually what helped him.
Interesting.
So,
Because
that was probably the most.
according to Wikipedia, they say Steve Maxwell is the first person to teach kettlebell in the United States. But we all know how
He
accurate
might be. He
Wikipedia
might
is.
be. Yeah, that it could very well be.
And
I think the
also,
truth
uh,
probably is that he was one of the very first to have a studio, because he did learn from Pavel. And, the other stuff he was learning, it was like from old wrestling books, like pictures. So it was like, okay, that movement. But there was no kettlebell when he started, right? So he had to fashion his own kettlebell. So we're talking, yeah, like 2000. There was another guy in the West Coast in the Bay Area named Mark Rifkin. He was probably in that same period, one of the first guys, teaching it in a gym kind of thing as a personal trainer. That's probably true. By
and
2005, though, I was really the first guy that started bringing it around the world. And it was because of Shihan with the YouTube. I would start getting messages like, hey, I'm in Singapore. You know, I want to do your seminar. Do you ever come to Singapore? And it was this type of conversations that were going on. And so I was getting invited to places. And then when I would go, one of my first European ones is I went to London and I went to Spain. I went to Barcelona and London. And in both of those cases, there were people that attended those workshops from like other countries. And then they're like, hey, I went to your thing in Spain and I want you to come to Italy now. And I'm going to bring you to Milan. And then 6 months later, I'm in Italy. And it was kind of, and that just, and it happened real fast because it was new everywhere. Like it didn't really, Europe, I mean, in the history, yes, in Europe there is a history in old Europe, but again, Europe they don't know, they forgot about the kettlebell. It wasn't active, right? And so Europe was a couple years after U.S. Australia was a couple years after U.S., but Asia didn't start till I started teaching in Asia. Like my first seminar actually 2007. And then 2008 a lot, and after 2008, but China not till 2014. China took even longer because it's a more closed in that regard. And then Eastern Europe even younger. Eastern Europe only really like 5 6 years ago, 7 years ago did it start. Like I was getting invited to Bosnia and Croatia, and so it's really interesting how I noticed the geo influence of trends just with the kettlebell trend, but I think it's probably similar for other trends as well. There's an economic factor, there's a cultural factor, and it kind of seems to follow this pattern where, for example, the former communist countries, is only in recent history they're not that they had communism. So there wasn't really free market enterprise in any sense like there is now. And so you weren't having people spending on luxury items. And when you combine that with the fitness and you combine that with the internet, where now we can easily access information. And now, okay, we have more of a economy that's based more on free market. Not really. They tell us it is. Free market's a component. What it really is consumerism, because these countries, even the communists, they figured out, well, we can get these people addicted to spending money and we can make more money off of them like that, right? But the point is people spend money in these countries where before they didn't, you see? And so it's like, okay, now we have a little bit of extra money, so we're going to invest in our health. And when you don't have anything, when you're just breaking your back, working some medial, that you don't love and you just have enough, well, there's no incentive to really care for yourself, right?
Hmm.
So that's kind of, I see the pattern. It kind of follows that, where as they start modernizing, they start paying more attention to the health and fitness. And then obviously the kettlebell being an important factor. And it's just really interesting how my experience parallels the experience if you look at the geopolitical and economic aspects of these different countries. Like when I was going to Africa, I'd only really would go to South Africa, because South Africa is really the only part of Africa where you're most likely going to be doing that kind of business, unless you're in oil and infrastructure where they do, Nigeria, there's other places. But in terms of like anything that is at all connected to the Western world for trends, it's going to be in South Africa. It's not going to be in like deep, dark Africa, right? So it's really interesting how my experience in doing all those kettlebell classes and seminars, I was able to learn a lot about these other aspects as well.
That's what I think is amazing. You being able to travel around the world and see different countries, but also I wanted to ask you. I heard a podcast with you, and if I understood right, I think you kind of said that because the Turkish getup is maybe one of the more popular, trendy reels, Instagram workout that you see, and and if I understood right, Maxwell kind of showed it to Pavel from reading a bunch of wrestling books, and that there is no Turkish like kettlebell origin, I guess.
Yeah, I would put my money on that being the most likely real history, in the sense, context. Basically, Steve being one of the first guys, and I think Steve was one of the first guys that Pavel connected to when he had this kettlebell book, and then they figured out with John Duquesne. John Duquesne is the one that was able to find a local foundry in St. Paul, Minnesota, that was able to produce the first kettlebells, and so that enabled them to create the certification, because we have the book, we don't have the kettlebell. Now we have the kettlebell, and now we can create the course, right? And so Steve was in that first wave of people, and he being a longtime wrestler and then black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, one of the very few at that time in U.S. Um, that was a guy that Pavel wanted to connect with, and Steve had already been researching physical culture books, like the old books, like the Eugene Sandow or the Strongman, from the all the content that had been around, and kind of went out of style when we got into the fancy gyms at the 24 hours in the valleys where you have the machines. But prior to that era, up until like the 1950s and Weeder, and it was pretty much these exotic exercises like the Turkish get up and the windmill. Those were more commonplace back then, and they just kind of went out of vogue. So
Mm.
Steve was kind of revisiting that through some books that he was looking at. And, so I did hear that story, and I have no reason to doubt that that's probably how it happened. Is that, you know, Steve and Pavel in their first encounter, Steve saying, "Hey, we can do this with the kettlebell, and we can do this," and it makes sense because for a lot of different reasons, but just one, without being too controversial, let's just look at the Russian kettlebell sport, because the kettlebell sport is what they do in Russia. There is no RKC or fitness. Well, it's fitness, of course, because it's a sport where you're moving your body intensely. So, of course, there's a fitness component, but you're doing it as a sport for competition. It's like jujitsu. It's a sport, but it's not a sport, right? Like jujitsu, there's a sport of jujitsu, but then there's just the practice of
Right.
jujitsu, and you may or may not be competing. It's still the same art. So similarly, in but in reverse, right? In Russia, the way that kettlebell is known is it's known as the sport. It's not known as, hey, we're going to go to the gym and we're going to do Turkish get up and swing. So those movements, the Turkish get up, as you mentioned, it's not a part of really the Russian kettlebell style and method, because the style and method of the Russian kettlebell, it's based on repeats, and it's based on the inertia. It's based on the swinging, the pendulum. And so the pendulum gives you the swing, the clean, the snatch, and then it gives you the long cycle, the clean and jerk. So, you know, it's like Olympic weightlifting in that regard, where with the Olympic weightlifting, there's a lot of different supplementary movements you do, like front squats and so on, or overhead squats. But in terms of the sport, you're competing in snatch and clean and jerk, right? And so it's the same thing with kettlebell. Difference, it's not a maximal weight where you're doing it once. It's a sub maximal, and you're doing as many times as you can in 10 minutes. And whoever does the most reps in that period of time wins. So it's power endurance, whereas Olympic lifting is pure power and over in a few seconds, right? And so, the way that the kettlebells were introduced in, say, the rest of the world is completely different than how it was actually done from where it comes from. Because we called, it's very ironic because the name of the course and the book is Russian Kettlebell Challenge, but the style of kettlebell that they're doing was not really the Russian kettlebell style. It was the Russian kettlebell style that they used to do in Russia a long, long time ago before they modernized. That's like
Mm.
saying the jujitsu that you're learning is like the jujitsu from the 1950s, like the lucha libre or something like that, right? It evolved and went through transitions and evolutions and different techniques, and even the tool and the balance, like what's the diameter of the handle, what's the space for the hand, the window, right, the diameter. And if you want the symmetry of the kettlebells as you move up and down the kettlebells, heavier and lighter, where they're the same size, versus the kettlebell where they get bigger as they get heavier, right? It's two different things, because in sport and competition where you're trying to do the maximal output, it becomes a precision game. At the higher levels of, and that's true pretty much for every sport, at the higher level, it becomes more precision. So, yes, if you're trying to get tired, if your objective is, I want to get tired, I want to sweat, and I want to be tired, you can do kettlebells and you can do any number of different things, and it's going to make you tired. Okay. And some people identify that as being fitness. And that's not where I'm coming from. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying there's another aspect that a lot of people maybe don't consider, in that there's this practice and there's a skill and there's an art form. And, I personally believe there is such a thing as best use for every tool, because a kettlebell is a tool at the end of the day. it's a handheld tool. So it's an extension of the hand. And therefore, as I said, what I teach is the martial art of kettlebell, because again, the extension of a hand is like a weapon, like a knife or a sword or a stick or a gun. It's an extension of the hand. It only goes as far as the hand that wields it. So the kettlebell also is not magical, although it seems to give that magical results if it's new in your life and you didn't know about it and now you did it and you've been doing it and it changed everything, because it is magical, but it's not magical from any physical reasons, because it's just a weight. It's magical in the way that it's exercising your body, that's different than all the other exercises that you're doing. And that I think ties more into the energetics, and it relates. So you could also make a distinction of kettlebell. It's a martial art, but kettlebell also is a yoga, because you can also have the meditative, where it's the synchronization of the breath with the movement, and you're finding that rhythm, and now you're riding that. So, a yogi can understand that in that regard. And, in jujitsu, but again, jujitsu can also be yoga in the same regard, because where is it where you're just in the flow, you know? You can
And,
talk about pahada and fight, but the highest level of combat is to win without fighting. So if you can evolve to where you're not even fighting, you're playing, right? The one who's fighting is using more energy, because when you're fighting, you are naturally putting a resistance, and there's going to be that anxiety and that energy. Whereas if you're not fighting, there is that resistance isn't even there. Now it's just this dance, right? And you have perfect balance, so you end up in the correct position at all times. That's what I want. And I think that's probably what most people want in their, in our system, the Hibero, our phrase is a flow pressure finish, right? Flow pressure finish. But I'm sure, all jujitsu can say the same, regardless of if it's, because it comes from Gracie, if you know the history, right?
right.
And so the flow, everyone talks about pressure, yes, but how do you set up the pressure? You have to flow through the gap. And now you have the body leverage to be able to apply the pressure, which of course that's going to lead to the finish, because pressure makes diamonds, and in the meantime, uh, it creates reactions. So, it's beautiful, just the science of all of it. And I integrated it with the kettlebell and the jujitsu, but there's so many similarities because of framing. It's architecture. You're learning how to use your bones in a way, and that's outside of the fitness and the strength culture, because in that culture there's still the idea of bigger being better and stronger. More strong is more better, and that's true. Stronger is better. However, a less skillful strong is not as good as a skillful less strong. You see, the skill is even more important, because if it's truly strong, it has skill. If it doesn't have the skill, then it's not truly strong, because that's not the strong that's going to last. It's not sustainable. You're going to get tired. You're going to get old, all these things. The skill is universal, and it's always there, because it's based on, again, it's science. These are physical sciences, right? So trust the science, as they say, right? Who feels it knows it. So,
No, I'm so thankful that you came on, because kind of what you are doing and have done is, you could say it's completely new, because you're mixing it with the martial arts, which is, that's what I love about kind of doing a little bit of everything. I kind of take something from one art or one workout and blend it with something else. And kettlebells were definitely addicting. Once you buy one, you end up buying more. So, how many kettlebells do you have total?
well, I have dozens and dozens, but just here in my little home dojo, I can just show you a quick. And this is a special. a really special treat because it's rarely been seen. It's not even
Nice.
released to the public yet, but you see these beautiful.
Oh,
These are actually these are actually the Steve Cotter signature kettlebell from my partner Ziva, and waiting for after the Chinese New Year. We'll be very soon. We'll be able to have international distribution. Right now, we don't have distribution in North America.
okay.
We have distribution in some countries, but the company is located in China. My partner's over there, Ziva. So after the Chinese New Year is when China opens back up. If you're familiar or not familiar, the factories and the companies tend to shut down for sometimes almost 2 months, leading up to, and then for a few weeks after Chinese New Year, things just. But then Chinese New Year's over, they start opening, things go fast. So I'm excited. But yeah, over the years, I mean, I have some here. I have inside, I keep about 16 right here. Then, I have outside, I have probably another 30. My
Wow.
son's got a bunch at his house. I've sent some away. My daughter, my girlfriend, some at her house. So, I mean, over the years, they don't go bad. You
That's
see,
true.
so they keep. So I haven't really gotten rid of too many of my kettlebells unless I've given them or handed them out to family members or friends or something like that. But it's not something you get and don't use, or something you get and it's something you get and use. So yeah, I have more than enough for me, you know. And then when I do events and stuff, it's I'll just go, and they have to have kettlebells. Starting to do events again. Before the pandemic, I was doing events for many years. Again, traveling around the world, and then the pandemic came and hit us and impacted the world in a way that we had not experienced before, and that kind of changed a lot of the reality for all of us. And for me, it was like I'm still teaching, but it's Zoom,
Zoom. Yeah.
and doing classes like that. And um,
So actually, that leads me. I've had your Instagram on the fortune cookie, which for those people who watch the replay or in the audience now, if you click on it, it's a hyperlink. It'll take you to your Instagram. But
also,
people will also be listening to the replay. So how can they contact you if they wanted to train with you?
actually, Instagram is definitely the best format. If you're on Facebook, you can hit me up at Steve Cotter IKFF. Send me a message there. Yeah, I definitely have a lot of things I'm offering, a lot of content. I also have a lot of free content on my YouTube channel. You can go to the IKFF channel on YouTube, and mobility exercises, breathing exercises, things you can do for rehabbing, old injuries or getting rid of stiffness. Tons of kettlebell work, integrating kettlebells with jujitsu and martial arts. So lots of info for everybody, really. You want free content? Definitely go to YouTube. You want to take one of my weekly classes? Hit me up on Instagram. If you're a trainer, you want to upgrade your professional knowledge, your skills, and master master the kettlebell. I'm doing instructor courses several times throughout the year. So lots of opportunities to help and to serve. Definitely.
Yes, I love that. It just depends on time. But this could be my last question, but you're one of the first persons that I've also heard like talking about holistic mind body training when even now people say it's woo woo. And you've been saying that for a long time, and just from getting to know you, I just have to assume it has all to do with the martial arts training. How it
I'm
just
grateful to the martial arts. I feel there was a time when traditions were oral traditions. I'm a student. And I'm a voracious reader. Well, it's mostly audiobooks in this day and age, but because it's more convenient, but consumer of information and knowledge, and just empty cup, wanting to learn, and I spend a lot of my available time studying human history and paleontology. And it's an interesting area nowadays because the technology is rapidly accelerating in that particular field, whether you're talking about Egyptologists or just paleontology in general, and human history and excavations. And with the carbon dating technologies now, they've pretty much all the current, all the previous ideas about human origins are being rewritten and re-understood. We now understand that there's records going back hundreds of thousands of years, at least, of, you know, our ancestors. Essentially, we are the descendants of the hominids who have been walking these earth for quite a long time. And that's very fascinating to me, and so yes, the holistic, my position is that we have to be willing to consider everything that we've ever been taught and everything that we've ever learned, everything that we know or we think we know, and just give the possibility that we could be wrong about most of it or even all of it. So if I accept the possibility that all my ideas could be wrong or incomplete, or I didn't have, that gives me the power to fill that void with more information, right? Different, and that's what I do. And we can apply that to movement, but we can apply that to many things. So the point of me even bringing this up is, we talk about holistic. Well, that's just a word to say the whole. So the whole what? Well, the whole person. Well, what is the person? Well, the person, we have our body. So if you're a materialist, you're just going to stop with that. Okay. But even if you're really a materialist in the sense that you believe there's a body and there's nothing more, so you don't believe in spirit, well, you have to accept the possibility that, well, we have ideas and we can actually project our ideas outside of the physical body, right? Even just through the eyes, like you can look at something that's across the street. It's not inside of you, it's over there, but you know it's there, right? So you know it's real, even though it's not your body. So we basically don't have any disagreement about the idea of what we would call the mind or the consciousness. So everyone agrees that we have a body, and I'm pretty sure everyone agrees that we have a mind. Okay, so where's the disagreement come in is, oh, what about the spirit? Well, what's the spirit? Okay, so a lot of fights and wars and things have been argued and fought over this essential idea of trying to communicate that, right? And so the mind, body, and spirit, right, is this, and different religions have different trinities, the three. Okay, whether it's the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit is one manifestation, right? Well, the heaven, the earth, and the man, there's a connection, you see. So there's the atmosphere. You can call it heaven, you can call it atmosphere, whatever you want to call it. There's the human body, and there's the earth beneath us, beneath our feet. Take your shoes off and walk with your toes, right? And you can feel the earth beneath you, and you can feel it against your body, and you can breathe the air, right? And there's this space. So most likely there is a whole world that goes way beyond just the physical body, right? There's a lot of indications that we're very small in the grand scheme of all that's in existence. Okay, so when I'm talking about holistic, it's just to say that we have to look after all aspects, right? You can't just look after one aspect like, oh, the body. Well, how are you gauging that? Is it looking in the mirror? You like what you see or you don't like your seat? Okay, but either way, that's not all that you are. So if your whole identity is based on the appearance perception that you have of yourself in the mirror, right? There can be something more. That's what I say. There can always be something more. So, we start going into all this, and then what about relationships where it's like you got your body, someone else, and now there's this connection to the two become the one, right? So this is, why is relationships so important to humans? Well, if we look at the human story is a story based upon family and societies. So that's also part of the holistic, because there's a lot of programming, a lot of education, a lot of information is not all good. We're in the information age, but not all information is trustworthy or reliable or healthy. So, how do we decipher which information? Because it's a formation. So, we're in this like time where there's so much information, it's so rapid. What do we choose? So, with the holistic, it's like, let's demystify it. Okay, with all this background talk, let's demystify it. The mind, we know what that is. Okay, the body, we for sure know what that is because you can touch it and you can feel it. The mind, we basically also know what that is unless we're out of our mind. Okay, but then everyone else knows and you don't know. And then, well, let's not talk about the spirit. Let's talk about the breath. So now we have the mind, body, and the breath. Okay, and now we're still working with that magical three. The three is very important because the three, when you bring the three and the three together, right? What do you have? You have the three is the me and the we, right? If you take the me and you flip it, you have because if it's just me, right, and I'm like this against the earth, I'm closed. When I flip that, you see now I'm open. I got all this that's now open. All I did was reconfigure the me to the we. So now you become an important part of the story as well. It's not just my story. It's it's we. Okay? And you also have the east and you have the west, right? The east and the west. So, and then when you have the three and you have the three, you bring them together, but my tribe, my woman and me and my child and yours, and we form bands. So now you have the six, and now you have the unit. And you have three, now you have the nine. Three, six, and nine. Smarter people than me, Tesla even said, if you can harness the power of the three, six, and nine, you own the secrets of the universe. Okay, so anyway, I'm just having fun with it. But yes, the holistic, we have to look after more than just this. Because let's say you have a good body, okay? And, but maybe you're miserable in every regard other than that. Like you find your comfort in the gym, maybe, but you don't have any relationship with your kids, or it can be any different number of things, right? You're in a horrible relationship, or you don't have any money to pay the bills, or it can all be all these other things where your life could be a total mess, and yet you look good or you're in shape. Okay, so that's not holistic in my way of seeing it. And, or I'm this super smart technocratic guy that is all biohacked, but I'm ignorant about physical education. Well, because that's the thing, the Silicon Valley, I don't want Silicon Valley running the show, because if you're not, for me to be able to trust you, I'm not saying you have to be jujitsu, because I trust you if you're jujitsu, because it doesn't lie. You see what I'm saying? It's not about the levels. Doesn't matter if you get me, I get you. That's not the point of it. We learn. The point of it is that it's there's no, it's just honest. It's just honest because it works. And it's like, if you do it good, you get a good result. And if you do that, you're going to get a different result, you know? And so what I'm saying is physical education is now the salvation for humanity and for whatever we want to become of civilization. If we're going to continue to function as human beings, working with other human beings in some economic system, right? How are we going to move that forward? Well, or do we want to just all be wearing masks forever, right? So we're like, I am the man in the mask now. Well, that's not who, that's just, you don't see me, right? If you just seeing that. So it's like, where are we going? I'm saying physical education, 40 years, I'm going to teach your kids and then their kids. And now that's the world that we're going to hand over, because I want the 18 and the 19 and the 20 and the 21-year-olds. At that point, they are highly trained individuals. By the time they're young adults, and maybe that's not everything, but if you have that, you have a level of self-control and a level of self-discipline and a level of competence that you're going to be able to deal with the challenges before you. You're better equipped to deal with whatever is in front of you than if you have other things but you don't have that. Because if you got the money and you got the tech, but it's like you're getting your exercise through this app, that's not, it doesn't work that way. Okay, you can't take away the skills. The skills is part of, we don't want to be plugged in the machine to the point where, oh, I don't even have to do jujitsu anymore. I'm just downloading. We don't want that. Or whatever, the perfect body. And there's people that are living in that idea with the meta, and I'm saying, no, we got to stay grounded. So yeah, it has to be holistic, because the mind, the body, and the breath is the way. That's the holistic. The body, the mind, well, it's real simple. What do you think about? Think about your breathing, and now move. So now I move, and my mind is, it's aware of the breath, and now the breath and the movement are synchronized. And so that's how we use the breath. We use the breath to connect the mind and the body. And so this is the Holy Trinity that I'm functioning in, because that's something that there's no barriers to entry. Your beliefs will not limit you in that experience. Wim Hof is an important person in the work that he's doing, because Wim Hof is giving a lot of awareness about his system is his system. You have a lot of copycats, and again, that's a compliment, because people are copying him because what he does is so amazing, and it's creating a lot more interest and a lot more study and innovations and different ideas about the breathing techniques. But at the end of it, he's just giving people a technique to go deep inside of their own bodies, and it's about love, and if I'm going to summarize all this at the end of the day, man, all of this, it's just about love. You got to love yourself, forgive yourself, because we have the capacity to heal. The human body, very sophisticated. Some believe that we are the incarnation of God herself, God himself, however, if you want to genderize that, but humans, we have a written and a spoken language. So we are unique among the animals, but we are animals, but we are very unique kind of animal that has this written and spoken language. And we have the opportunity to use that voice to create the stories that will stay after, because we're not here forever, man. This body, it's not what it's about. I mean, that's just part of it. You want to be healthy, and all the things, but it's what that foundation can provide for the rest of the life. So with that physical education, now you can take that self-discipline, because that's what the physical education is. It's the learning of the self-discipline through the practice of whatever you're practicing. It's all, there's only two basic instincts that we have as primitive beings. If we forget that we have these phones and we just go back in time, we were once the caveman or the people in the forests, right? And then we found fire and we found paper and we figured out how to use the charcoal to write, and now we could have messages and we carry it in the words. It says in the books, in the beginning was the word. The word is what created all of this and ideas. Okay. And it's because we have the ability as humans, we can take an idea and we can make some physical thing out of that idea. Creation. It's a creation. So I'm saying that the physical education becomes more important than ever because of the proliferation of the technology. We will not be human anymore if we lose that basically animalistic nature. And in the beginning, as these primitive beings, when, okay, we didn't have refrigerators and cars and stuff, we were figuring out where we're going to sleep, where we're going to eat, right? It wasn't that long ago. People don't realize that. It was only some generations, depends on part of the world you're in. If you're from Indonesia, it might have been your grandparent. If you're from Western Europe or something, then it's a few hundred years, Industrial Revolution. But, people take that, it's so easy to forget because we all have smartphones. But, just keep thinking back. Oh, what about when it was just black and white TV? Oh, what about when it was just radio? What about there was no radio? What about it was telegraph? What about before that, right? What about before that where there was no refrigeration? Your food went bad if the weather, and all this stuff. And yet here we are. We're survivors. So fight and flight, that's the primitive thing that kept, right? The fight and the flight instinct is what enabled us to be able to overcome these different challenges. Like we got to get out of here because there's danger, or we got to be able to fight and defeat this danger. And so it was true then and it's true now. So that's really what I'm doing with my stuff. Is everything I'm doing, it's 100% going to be functional, going to be practical. You're going to make you move better, or it's going to make you be able to stand your ground better. And that's the fight and the flight. You're going to move or you're going to stay. You're going to stay, you're fighting. You're going to move. Move is better. If you can move, but you can't always move, right? Sometimes you got to protect the space.
Well,
defend.
of course. And I want to say thank you because, yeah, not only are you a kettlebell pioneer, but also, sorry, I think my volume. Yeah, I want to say thank you. Not only are you a kettlebell pioneer, but also, I'm trying to spread a couple main messages. One is just move, get working out. Doesn't matter what you do, get some movement in. And I'm kind of trying to get the average person. And then the other thing I'm trying to target is
people. We're all average people with extraordinary qualities. you know, we're all average people with extraordinary possibilities and extraordinary qualities. But yeah, man, feel good. You feel good. If you don't move, you ain't gonna feel good.
And the other thing I'm trying to do is to get people to realize you just can't do like one thing. Like you can't just do cardio and then no weights, and then a lot of people will be like, oh, I got that, but they're not doing that whole body mind connection. So, you're also a pioneer in that as well. So I wanted to thank you so much. And it was great having you. I, of course, always would love open doors here on Fireside for you. So if anybody wants to reach out to Steve, I will be putting all the information on the podcast. There's also the link. Anything I missed out that you want to close out with?
No, I mean we talked a lot. You've been a gracious host. Let me do so much talking, and it's just fun spending time with you and everyone that took the time to watch. But yeah, just reach out. I'm here to serve, fight the good fight. I'm a big believer in the potential of humanity to move things forward in a positive direction, and I just do my part. Through the experience of the physical fitness and the health and well-being via body, mind, and breath. So awesome. You guys stay blessed.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of Athletic Definition. I will be back next week. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Till next time. And thank you, Steve.